Which teams will win 10 games in 2023? I'm going to give you my pick on the 10 safest bets. Again, we're going to take a look at the 10 teams most likely to win 10 games in 2023. That does not necessarily mean that these are my top 10 teams. It's just based off of the schedules and the scenario and the situations here. So let's get into it, and we're going to count them down from the least likely to most likely. And I can almost guarantee you guys already know who my top 2 teams are here. But let's start at number 10. So that's Clemson, and this number 10 spot was kind of tough for me because I think I feel really good about the top 9 teams. I don't feel great about Clemson, but I feel pretty good. I think this team more than likely does get to 10 wins. You do have some challenging games on the schedule. You've got Duke, potentially a tough game there. You've got Florida State. You've got Miami on the road, a game that I think is going to be tough. You've got NC State on the road, a game that could be tough. You've got Notre Dame, and then you've got South Carolina on the road. That's 6 games. There's 6 games that they could potentially lose. They split those games. They go 9-3. They don't get to 10 wins. But I think this Clemson team is good enough. I think they will get to 10 wins. I think they could even get to 11-1. I don't see them running the table this year, but I do think that they do get to 10 wins. And so they are my number 10 team in terms of teams most likely to get to 10 wins this season. Number 9 is USC. USC, another team with a great shot to get to 10 wins this year. But they've got some tricky games as well. You've got Notre Dame, you've got Utah, Washington, Oregon, maybe even throw UCLA in there. But if you just look at those first 4, well, if they split those 4 games, they're going to go 10-2, and that's what I ultimately think is going to happen. I think this team will go 10-2. It would take a lot, in my opinion, for them not to get to 10 wins. You'd have to lose, let's say on the road to Notre Dame, and then on the road at Oregon, and then lose at home to Utah or Washington. I just don't see them losing 3 games. So I think USC is a very safe bet to get to 10 wins this season. Number 8, Tulane. Tulane also is in great shape. Even if they don't beat Ole Miss, you still got room for another loss in there somewhere. They do play Memphis on the road. They play East Carolina on the road. And they play a really good UTSA team. UTSA did not make the list because they've got Houston and Tennessee. And then they have to go on the road to face Tulane. So I don't feel as good about them getting to 10 wins. But I feel great about Tulane. Would be really surprised if they didn't get to 10 wins. UAB's in there. That's a pretty good team. So, yeah, this team could go 10-2. But there's a really good chance they go 11-1. And I wouldn't even count them out against Ole Miss. I think they've got a shot at home in that game. So I do feel like Tulane is going to get to 10 wins this season. They should definitely be right there at least at 10-2. Moving on to number 7, Tennessee. Feel really good about them getting to 10 wins. You've got Alabama. That's going to be a tough one. And you've got Georgia, obviously, 2 really tough games. There are some tricky games in here. Kentucky and Missouri on the road, even Florida on the road. But I really feel like this Tennessee team is a step above those other teams that I just mentioned, and I think they're going to take care of business. And, I'm not going to count them out against Alabama or Georgia. I think they've got a shot in those games. They do have South Carolina and Texas A&M. So the more I look at this schedule, the more I'm thinking, maybe I put Tennessee a little bit too high. Probably really maybe should have put them down there around 9, around the same spot as Clemson. Because if you look at Florida, you look at South Carolina, Texas A&M, Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri, Georgia, there are 6 or 7 games that they could potentially lose. But I feel confident. I really think that this offense is going to be tough to stop, and I think they're going to be able to get to 10 wins again this season. I've got them at 10-2. And again, even if they were to slip up somewhere, remember, they could pull off an upset. They beat Alabama last year, and they get Georgia at home, so you never know. Number 6 is Alabama. Not as high as we would normally have them. Alabama, normally when we do these videos, they're up in the top 3 or 4 for sure. But I think the schedule's pretty tough, and I'm not as high on this Alabama team. It's kind of a team that we don't know a ton about. I think it's going to be a much different Alabama team than we saw last year. It could work, and they could be really, really good, like the old days, or maybe it doesn't, and they don't have a great season. But still, I think they do get to 10 wins. You've got Texas in there. Ole Miss is at home. I don't see them losing that game. Texas A&M is going to be tough on the road. You've got Tennessee and LSU both at home, so that helps. Kentucky, I don't see winning. You've got Auburn in the Iron Bowl on the road. So there are some tough games here on the schedule for sure. But, I mean, it's Nick Saban. It's still Alabama. They're still loaded with talent, and their defense alone and their run game should be enough for them to get back to 10 wins this season. So that's where I've got Alabama at number 6. Number 5, LSU. just ahead of the Crimson Tide. You know, I said this to an LSU fan the other day. Anything less than 10-2 is a major disappointment. I mean, you've got Florida State and you've got Alabama. Those are really tough games. They could lose both of them, but they really should not lose to anyone else on this schedule. Ole Miss on the road could be a tricky one. Missouri on the road, possibly an upset. And upsets, of course, do happen in college football. But LSU should be better than those teams. They get Florida at home. They get Texas A&M at home. And again, back to those two games, Alabama and Florida State, they could win one of those games. And I've actually got them beating Florida State, so I've got them at 11-1. So a little wiggle room there to get to 10 wins. I think LSU gets it done. Number 4, there is Florida State, and I think they I actually think, so I have LSU beating Florida State, but I think Florida State has a better chance of getting to 10 wins than LSU because of this schedule. I mean, who's going to beat them? If they lose to LSU and they lose to Clemson, who else on this schedule is going to beat them? You've got Pittsburgh on the road. Maybe that's a tough one. They get Miami at home. You have Florida on the road. I really am curious to see this Florida team. I'm not real high on them, but I think there's potential there. It really is going to come down to Graham Mertz and really that offensive line for Florida and how good they are. So that's a tough one. Tough for me to figure out for sure how good Florida's going to be. It's a rivalry game. So yeah, they could lose, let's say, to Florida, Clemson, and LSU. That would be a way that they did not get to 10 wins, but they could also beat Clemson or beat LSU. So I feel pretty good about Florida State getting to 10-2. I don't think they get to 11-1. It's kind of strange here. We've got Florida State ahead of LSU, even though I've got Florida State at 10-2 and LSU at 11-1. But just looking at the odds to win all these games, I think Florida State's going to be favored in more games by more than LSU is on their schedule. All right, let's go now to number 3, Penn State. Okay, so another example, I've got Penn State at 10-2, so I do think they get to 10 wins, but I don't think they're better than LSU or Florida State. And if you look at my rankings, you're like, wow, how is Penn State number 3? Well, it's because of the schedule. I mean, you've got Ohio State and Michigan. Those are going to be really tough games. Very good chance they lose both of them. I'm predicting them to lose both of them, but then who else is going to beat them? If Penn State's a top 10 team, they shouldn't lose to anyone else. You've got Illinois on the road, could be tricky. You've got Iowa, but that's at home. I mean, I just don't see anyone beating them. The Michigan State game is at Ford Field, so that's not even a true road game. Maryland on the road, I'm not high on them, so I just do not see Penn State. I don't see any way they don't get to 10-2, and they could beat Ohio State or Michigan, and then you've even got some wiggle room. You can afford an upset to get to 10 wins. So I feel very confident that Penn State gets to 10 wins. We'll see what happens. But number 2 is Michigan. Again, you guys are going to know the top 2. They're the top 2 in everything, it seems like. Michigan is not losing more than 2 games, and I don't even see them going 10-2. I've got them undefeated. You've got Penn State and you've got Ohio State. Obviously, those are going to be the 2 tough games, and maybe they do somehow lose both of those games. I don't see them losing to anyone else. Minnesota on the road, that's an upset alert type game, a tricky game. Maryland on the road, Michigan State on the road, I just don't see them losing to these teams. They've really established themselves as an elite team over the last couple of years, and they should not lose to any of those teams. So, again, I've got them at 12-0. I don't see them losing to anyone, but if they do lose a game or 2, yeah, it could happen. That's going to be worst case scenario. I don't see Michigan missing out on 10 wins, and I think Georgia's an even better lock. Look at their schedule. You've got the tough game against Tennessee, and that's going to be on the road. And again, it will be a tough game, I believe. You've got Auburn on the road. That could be a tricky one. But I mean, look at this schedule. Who's going to Ole Miss, maybe, because of their style of offense, but that one's in Athens. I just don't see. I'll tell you what, I would say right now, I think it's more likely Georgia has a better chance of going 11-1 than most of these other teams have of going 10-2. That's how confident I feel that they're going to at least get to 11-1 and for sure get to 10-2. Things would really have to blow up there for Georgia not to get to 10 wins. And I think they are definitely the safest pick, a team that I can pretty much guarantee, unless they have a bunch of injuries or something, I can pretty much guarantee this Georgia team is going to get to at least 10 wins in 2023. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with my list? Who do you think maybe should have been on the list? I thought about Texas, but it is Texas, and they do tend to lose to teams they're not supposed to lose to, and they do play Alabama in the non-conference. So I was looking at them and Clemson for that final spot. No one else really jumped out to me. I think Notre Dame has a really good shot to go to get to 10-2. but they've got some tricky games on their schedule as well. They would probably have been number 11 if I kept going with my list. But those are my 10 teams, again, that I think are most likely to get to 10 wins. Would love to get your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think down in the comments below.